red-eye gravy. That's right, usually when I post a recipe, I want you to make it. This time, not necessarily so. This is more of like a culinary anthropology thing. I just find this recipe fascinating for several reasons, most of those you read about on the blog. And the theme here is basically making something out of nothing. So we're gonna fry some ham and then, believe it or not, make a gravy with leftover coffee. Sounds good, right? So I had a nice piece of smoked ham. I'm gonna slice it into thick pieces. And then any of the scraps, any of the fat you trimmed off, I want you just to give that a rough chop. And we're gonna use that to make the base of the red-eye gravy. I'm gonna put a saute pan on medium heat with just a little splash of vegetable oil. And we're gonna cook those scraps until they're well browned and they give up most of their fat. All right, and you gotta be careful because ham is cured with salt and sugar. So you'll see there it starts to caramelize, starts getting sticky. And when your little meat pieces start sticking to your wooden spoon, that's a good sign that you're done. So when it looks like that, I'm going to turn off the heat. I'm going to remove those pieces of ham, but I'm going to leave all that fat behind. All right? Turn the heat back on medium, and then we're going to go ahead and brown our ham slices. All right, don't forget, back in the day, people didn't try to avoid fat. They tried to figure out how to get more of it in the diet. So this was a way to turn that excess fat into a palatable gravy that you could serve over your meat, over your grits, over your rice, over your bland, starchy side dishes to get some more energy to keep you going. And while it's browning, if you want to put a little more pepper on there, a little cayenne, a little black pepper, go for it. So once that's browned well on both sides, we're going to remove it from the pan. All right, you're just going to reserve that on a plate. We're going to turn the heat down to medium-low, and I'm going to put in just a pinch of flour. Now, traditionally, this doesn't have flour in it. It's just coffee and fat. But I do like to put a couple pinches in just to give it a little bit of body, a little bit of binding, and it's going to make what we call a temporary emulsification. We're going to cook that flour for about 2 minutes. At that point, I want you to turn the heat back up to medium-high, and then we're going to dump in old coffee. That's right, just leftover black coffee, bitter, harsh, but something happens to it when it hits that slightly sweet ham fat. And of course, you can also do this with bacon fat. You didn't even have to ask that. You were born knowing the answer to that question. All right, so whisk in your coffee. That flour is just going to thicken it up ever so slightly. It's going to emulsify with that pork fat, and you're going to have what sort of looks like a gravy. Now, you're going to have to taste it. Depending on how salty your ham was, you may have to season this. Maybe some pepper, maybe some cayenne. You know the drill. I'm going to add my ham back in just long enough to warm it. And that is done. All right, doesn't look that bad, right? But like I said, it's only a temporary emulsion. If you let that sit there for like a half hour, eventually the fat and the coffee will separate because there's just not enough flour in there to really hold everything together. And you really don't want a lot of flour in this. It's not supposed to be a thick, gloppy, starchy gravy. And I will admit, I went a little modern with the side dishes. I got mac and cheese and some beans, which of course go good with everything. And how does it taste? Very interesting, but in a good way. The bitter, harsh coffee sort of melds with that sweet, smoky ham, and it really does work. And I realize most of you are not going to try this or even want to, but I've heard about this dish. I always thought it was fascinating, and so I really wanted to try it. And I'm glad I did. So anyway, head over